Hi everyone, I'm Ben and you're watching The Snecker Show, and I would like to talk a little bit about filters. That's a super exciting topic, I know, but it seems to be a hot topic this year for reasons that I do not understand. I have some guesses though. Um, I was in a meeting at work several weeks ago and somebody said something that really caught me by surprise, and I had to give it some thought afterwards. He said that we don't wear masks to protect ourselves, we wear them to protect other people. And I sort of argued back on that a little bit, and he repeated that we don't wear masks to protect ourselves, we wear them to protect other people. The CDC says it. And I had to give it some thought later because I was wondering why anybody would say that. Maybe it was something I missed, maybe it was something he missed. And it occurred to me after a while that there are, maybe most people are looking for the CDC or other experts to just tell them what is and what isn't. Or a political party. A lot of people are looking for a political party to tell them what is and isn't true. This is not a political video, and it actually has no business in this video whatsoever. So I'm not mentioning any particular political party. I could say some things about all of them, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to point out that that whether or not a mask performs a certain way is not decided by a political party. That's a mechanical thing, not a political thing, right? You can decide if laws work a certain way, or if certain things will be allowed or denied, or if certain policies should be implemented or not. But you can't decide through policy whether a filter works a certain way or a mask works a certain way. So we're going to leave politics out of this because I'm hoping that everybody who's watching this will understand that politics and filtration aren't the same thing. And if you try to engage in political arguments in the discussion or in the comments below, hopefully everybody's just going to think you're an idiot and ignore you, because I really don't want this to turn into a political argument, because that's not what it's about. It's about filters, all right? It's a non-political subject, filters, all right? That's a mechanical thing. We have filters in our air conditioning units. They don't belong to any political party. Look, it's got red and blue on there, right? Filters work for everybody. I have some letters. These are filters, right? And I don't intend for anything that I'm saying to sound condescending. I'm talking in simple terms because not everybody understands mechanical things. So for some people, it might sound a little condescending that I'm explaining what a filter is, but really, I mean, if somebody asked you what is a filter and you had to define it, you could think of a filter in your head and see, think of examples of a filter, but if you really had to explain what a filter is and what a filter isn't, it might be a little more challenging. Or at least you'd want to give it a little bit of thought before you gave an answer, unless you work in filtration and you know the answer. But in short, a filter is anything that will allow a particle of a certain size to pass through and other particles to not pass through, depending on their size. Now there can be more complicated things and digital filters and things like that, but the idea is that this filter right here, this letter Q, all right, stole this from my son for this video. This letter Q would allow a particle of this size to pass through, right? Even this way, right? Filters work the same in both directions, unless they have some kind of advanced mechanical features built in. But a filter would not allow this thing to pass through, even if it goes in the other direction. So filters are omnidirectional, meaning they filter in both directions. And I have a letter O here also. It would work the same. I'll use these for a demo in a second. But, let me see. He's better at this than I am. He's been practicing. So if I can get this thing to line up on the right. What the heck? There we go. So we have a letter O and a letter Q. It just goes to show not everybody can figure things out right away. Letter O and a letter Q together. And this is just, kind of a bigger filter, right? Think about all these large holes representing all of the tiny little holes in this guy right here, all the tiny little holes in your coffee filter or whatever. So in this filter, as I have, numerous particles flying through the air and hitting this thing, these particles will be stopped by the filter. Actually, they'll kind of just stick there for the most part, eventually clog it up, which is why you have to change your air conditioning filters periodically. And smaller particles will pass through the filter until eventually the holes are clogged with larger particles or lots of smaller particles on top of each other. Then the filter will need to be changed. So that's why we change air conditioning filters, because they get clogged up with particles. And a lot of the particles that clog your air conditioning filters have passed through a few times before they actually got caught. But eventually, you know, as those holes get filled up with debris, they're going to become smaller and smaller, and then the filter really stops working and it just blocks everything. So, simplest terms, right? A filter is just something that allows some particles to pass through and other particles to not pass through. Now watch what happens if I take this filter. Let's say this is the version 1 of the mask that a lot of people were wearing. All right, just a single t-shirt layer. And let's say I fold this over now, all right, like a folded over t-shirt mask. I'm having a hard time with this thing. There we go. You fold the t-shirt over, and now you have 2 layers. Right? Both of these layers are still the same size hole, right? You fold this thing over, and now all of a sudden that particle that could pass through there before is more likely to get blocked. And that's why, you know, if you watch the CDC video when they talked about how to make a makeshift mask and they folded over a t-shirt several times, and then the Surgeon General put that over his face, right? The idea with folding the material over is that now we go from holes of this size to holes of that size. So you create a little bit of a baffle. So even something that wouldn't allow this, or that would allow this particle to pass through before, now won't, because it's got to go through those multiple layers. And you're just, you know, trying to catch more things through the air. And I will point out again, because this is extremely important, that if this thing won't pass through that way, it won't pass through that way, right? Because it's a filter. A filter works the same in either direction. Right? You got one of these in your kitchen? This is a filter, right? You can filter the same things this way, and if I were to punch this through the other way and try to filter this way, it would filter the same particles, right? Because it's a filter. It works the same in both directions. So the non-political, nonpartisan point that I would like to get at, just to clarify this for anybody who had any questions, is that if somebody asks you why we wear a mask, it depends, but this right here, this material that this mask is made out of, it works the same in both directions. All right? This is nothing but a filter that is conformed to my face. There is no directionality in masks. And just to point this out real fast, in case somebody brings this up in the comments, air conditioning filters have an arrow on there and it says airflow that way. All right? That's not because the filter works different in a different direction. That's because as these things start to get clogged up, you know, you get a bunch of little particles that fill up the hole here, and then it just blocks the air. I mean, we've probably all seen the dirty air conditioning filter. As this thing starts to get clogged up, the air continues to push, and eventually, as a formal rental property owner, I will attest to this, if you don't change your filters, or if your tenant doesn't change your filters, eventually it will clog up with particles, the air will keep pushing, and it will collapse your filter. Right, it'll suck it right inside the unit, and then you'll have to go in and do some repair work. And that's not because of a directionality thing, right? So you got the arrow on here. That's just because as the air or the filter gets clogged up and the air continues to push, you have this metal grid on this side that sort of acts as a reinforcing thing. So when the pressure is coming from this side, this grid holds it a little bit better. On that side, you don't have the metal grid. So even though it's glued on there, you know, with time, it could work its way loose from the metal grid, and this would just kind of, you know, collapse inside your system. So the reason there's a directionality or an arrow on this thing is not because it filters any different in either direction. It's just because one side has a metal reinforcement and the other does not. So that's all there is to that. Likewise, this thing right here, there's a directionality on this thing because if I put it on that way, it wouldn't work very well for obvious reasons, right? The directionality does not mean that the fabric is anything special or complicated so that it only filters particles in depends on who you ask, and that sounds like the baby doesn't want to eat dinner. But I do, so let's finish this up. So it's not because the particles would travel through that way and not the other way or vice versa. This is a filter, all right? It works the same in both directions. So to answer the question of why do we wear a mask, it depends on who's sick. But we don't really know. So if I'm sick and I wear the mask, the filter is going to catch particles that are going this way. If somebody else is sick and I'm wearing the mask, the filter is also going to catch particles that are going this way. So it's kind of like an air conditioning filter if your system were to reverse every once in a while. So you'd end up with particles on this side of the filter and when it switched direction, you'd end up with particles on this side of the filter. It's the same thing with this, right? If I want to protect myself, I would put on a mask because that would filter particles that were coming in this direction. And no, it's not an N100 filter. It doesn't filter 100% of the particles that go through the air. Everybody knows that. It's an N95 because it will filter 95% of the particles that are 3 microns or 0.3 microns or less. So that's not everything, but again, you have something that's folded over or woven, and it's going to do a pretty good job of catching things, even if they're smaller than the actual opening, because they're going to have to get through that path. So I put this on myself, and I am protecting myself from a large quantity of the particles, the actual non-air particles that are coming through the air towards my face. So that's a good thing. And if I happen to be sick and I put this mask on myself, as I exhale, the inside of the mask is going to catch particles that are going that way. So again, that's really all I wanted to say. Time to go in and eat. But a filter is non-directional. A filter is non-political. That's the very important part. I don't care which side of the fence you stand on, a filter is non-directional. And speaking of fences, if you're on one side of the fence or the other, the fence will block you from going through unless you find a way to bypass it. So filter, fence, whatever, it's all the same thing. So let's not be silly about this. Let's not be immature. Let's just understand what a filter is and recognize that no matter what kind of a mask you put on your face, it is going to offer some degree of filtration. But of course, you want to find the best mask possible for the situation and make sure that it is properly sealed. Because if I put this thing on upside down, it's still the same mask, but now I have crazy gaps up here. All right, so if I'm trying to filter a particle that's that big, I don't want to have gaps on my mask that are that big because it's not going to work the same. So it won't protect you the same, it won't protect other people the same. And I think that's all I have to say about filters. So hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully this doesn't start a crazy political war in the comments, because I might just delete it and serve as a comment filter for this video. So thanks for watching. I hope it was helpful. I mean, the only reason I said this is because some people might want to know this and might not understand. You don't have to listen to a medical opinion of how a filter works. It's a mechanical device, not a medical device, even though it is used in mechanical settings because of its, or used in medical settings because of its mechanical properties. Filters are filters, and you should put one on your face to protect yourself and to protect others. So I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching, and have a safe winter.